But then I'm giving them the choice to say, yeah, you know what? We know that we can make a financial sacrifice now, but still be okay and be able to do the things that were really important to them now. The wife, she just started tearing up, and she said, I never thought that I could stop. And she's like, now I can literally give my notice like tomorrow if I wanted to. And, you know, I think she's still delayed a little bit, but it was really empowering to be able to help them in that time where they were really struggling.
Welcome to the Modern Sense Podcast, your financial-friendly podcast navigating the ever-evolving world of personal finance. Join me, Andrea Thompson, for insightful interviews and non-traditional perspectives on modern finance. Let's redefine the way we think about money together. Today in the podcast, I welcome Justine Kelly. Justine is Modern Sense's newest financial planner, but she isn't new to financial planning. Welcome, Justine, and thank you for being my guest today.
Thank you so much for having me, Andrea.
Awesome. Well, first and foremost, tell me a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your planning career.
Yeah. So, you know, what I'll start with is I live in Southern Ontario. So, yeah, I know we do have people from all across the country, which is really exciting. And I started in the financial industry actually in 2008, which was a really interesting time to start actually. And I had moved to my area here for financial planning in my education. And I was lucky enough to get a co-op position shortly after I started my education. And it was in a dealership model. So what that meant was we sold and advised on investment products and insurance products, and also did some financial planning. I spent a good amount of time there. I was there for about 9 years, finishing up my education, getting licensed, and learning the ropes. But after doing some growing up and starting to kind of live my life a little bit more, I felt like I wasn't being challenged enough. And I felt like the focus wasn't placed on financial planning as much as I had hoped it would be. What it did teach me, though, is that my education and training was nothing like the real world. It taught me a lot of really great theories and strategies, but when it actually came down to meeting clients and working with different situations and backgrounds and values, it was completely different than the projects I had worked on in school. So that was a really good lesson for me. And that transitioned me to RBC, which was an interesting transition because a lot of people don't go to the bank from kind of a more independent model. But the reason why I had done that is because they have a very specific financial planning role where the focus was very much on the actual planning and not so much on the investment. And that's where I felt I really thrived. And I felt that it aligned with my values much better than the role I was in. And I was there for 6 years. It brought me through a ton of different situations, much more learning opportunities. I was able to meet and connect with so many amazing families and clients and really be that trusted person where they would come to me with just about everything. So I really enjoyed my role and the people that I met there. What became difficult was, as most people would echo from the banking industry, is the amount of metrics that were completely unachievable that I was consistently being measured on versus where I really placed the value in terms of helping the clients. And it was starting to create a significant amount of stress. They were changing the metrics on how many clients that I needed to provide service for by hundreds to manage by myself. And I just felt like I couldn't do the right things for them because of my limited capacity. So with that, I actually was at my doctor's office, my family physician's office, where I was talking to her about my stress of work and so on. And she said, well, I hope this isn't odd, but she said, my sister works in the financial industry too. And she felt a lot of the same things that you're feeling. And she actually started her own company, and it's called Modern Sense. And I thought, ta-da, that's weird, but I'll check her out. And that was about 2 years ago. And yeah, I did. I looked you up on LinkedIn. I checked out your website, and I was very impressed. But I wasn't in a spot where I felt like I could actually make that transition to being on my own, essentially. And so that was the extent of what I had looked into for Modern Sense. But I still needed a change. So I had transitioned in 2023 to more of a corporate role at Manulife, where instead of having clients directly, I was helping other financial planners do more financial planning and focus on that holistic service offering that, a lot of them were trying to transition their business to. And this was a short time for me there, but it showed me so many things. Being able to help other planners made me realize, that what I was able to do was really special, that I didn't necessarily feel I knew before. I thought I was just another planner, another advisor. But my ability to really create, value and help other planners create plans that were understandable and actionable to clients is where I really thrived. So after I left Manulife, I connected with you and I was exploring the idea of starting my own thing and really focusing on just the planning, because I knew this is where my heart really was and where I had slowly transitioned over the years. And so I, mentioned it again to your sister, my daughter, and then connected with you. And it's just been an amazing experience ever since. I'm working with lots of different clients already and really enjoying being able to truly say I'm offering unbiased advice that aligns with my values.
That's a fantastic story. And I think a lot of people can resonate within your words, especially people who have worked in different aspects of the industry, who have been through the bank channels, different brokerage channels, all of the different ways in which we can service clients in the financial industry. And it is an evolution, right? We don't all just start as, advice only planners. We have to take that journey and also gain the experience. And I think gaining all of that experience that you have has led you to become the confident woman that I spoke to only a few months ago, who is now part of a Modern Sense. So thank you for sharing that. And, we want to talk a little bit more today about the work you're doing, but also about advice-only planning. But I want to take a step back first, just to circle back to the beginning of your story, to ask, why did you choose to pursue a career in financial planning from the get-go? What was it about planning that resonated with you as an individual?
Yeah, so I would say that, really what hit close to home for me was, the values that I had started to develop in my early years. So growing up, we lived in extreme poverty. I grew up not knowing when I was going to get my next meal. We were going to food banks. I was in and out of the foster care system. And when I was 16, I had moved out on my own from my last foster home. And I had a budget of $663 a month I needed to live off of while I finished high school. And on top of that, because I was under the age of majority, I couldn't even get a credit card. No one would approve me. So it was really important that I made this $663 last for the entire month. And this is where I really started, doing my own little budgets and figuring out where money was going and how I could save, because I was really wanting to, pursue education after high school. I was very motivated. And I wanted a different life than the way I grew up. I wanted to break that cycle a lot of my family's past has been, living through poverty. And I mean, I'm happy to say that I feel like I really succeeded there. I took that motivation, and I got part-time jobs and started saving. And then I went to school, and actually I happened to only stumble upon a description of financial planning when I was changing my mind every other week about what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And when I read it, I was like, oh my God, this is a career? I didn't realize that people actually did this out there. And I mean, I was only doing just a little tippy top of, mostly just budgeting and cash flow, but it really resonated with me because I thought I can help other people, make sense of their finances and be able to accomplish the things that they really wanted to, and that meant, something to them that really had values back there. So yeah, I mean, in summary, I think it was really about my values and my childhood, which I think our childhoods actually have a really big impact on how we manage our finances and how we feel about money. So I would say that's definitely where my inspiration came from.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think, first of all, that's a wonderful story to have a positive outcome from in your perspective. And I applaud you for sharing that with the world, because that's a vulnerable place to be. Money trauma can start from a very young age. And there's a lot of good financial planners out there doing wonderful work around this. And I think often we focus too much on the numbers in financial planning and not on the human behind the numbers. And I know that from knowing you in the short time that I have, but also from hearing your words, that you can connect with that human element really well. And you've always talked about the values basis of how you approach planning, which is why I think what you say resonates so well with clients. And based on that, what is it that you like most about being a planner? What is it that when you come out of client conversations, when you've had that impact, what elements do resonate most with you?
Yeah, so I would say what really resonates the most with me is the ability to meet different people and hear their stories and hear about their goals, their aspirations. And it's exactly like what you had said, Andrea, about that human side of things. The numbers, it's fine. I learned that in school. I run many numbers. We have great software out there. I have all the strategies and the theories that I've used, in my past experience. I'm not worried about that part. What I, really look forward to and what really makes me feel fulfilled in my work is being able to give that reassurance and that guidance to the clients that I work with. And that's a really big thing for me. I really strongly believe that no goal is a monetary amount. No one comes in and says, I want to have $100,000. Okay, but why? What is it for? What is it going to do for you? How is it going to help you? And then being able to frame how we're going to reach those goals and how they're going to be able to feel accomplished is, what makes me feel great about my work.
Absolutely. And those goals and values-based conversations, I think, is a critical part to being a financial planner, period, point blank. Like you said, we can all run the math a million different ways, but focusing on those values and goals-based conversations, I think, is what is a differentiator. And I would say your superpower. But I think that, historically, and I was talking to a couple of colleagues about this morning, the financial industry has been focused on financial advising or working with a financial advisor. And traditionally, this usually means someone to help manage assets or purchase products from. But we are in a unique space that is a little bit different from that. And I think sometimes difficult for people to really understand the value of. So we are in something called advice-only financial planning, or some people may also call it fee-for-service financial planning. How would you describe this type of planning that we do to someone who has never heard of it before?
So I would describe our advice-only planning as really being your CFO or chief financial officer. It's really a spot where we're advising and planning specifically for each and every one of those clients. And it's very unbiased advice. The past in history, like you mentioned, a lot of people see advising as, your financial advisor at the bank or the advisor your parents worked with. And not saying that they're not going to give you great advice, but where we come from is a place of complete unbias. So an advice-only planner is not compensated in any way whatsoever other than directly from that client. And to me, that provides significant transparency in terms of what they're paying and what value they're getting from it versus the muddled waters of, commission-based advice, for example. And we know that we're going to only provide advice that comes from a place of meeting those clients' needs or what they're looking for without any ties to product sales, investments or insurance, any referral fees or kickbacks. I think that's an important one to mention because sometimes, somebody may not be compensated financially, but there may be kickbacks. And, we're in a very true sense advice only, and our only compensation comes from, each client that works with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And having worked in an industry that, is very big on, or has been, let's say historically very big on, trip incentives or bonus incentives or sales incentives that isn't always visible to the end client, I think it's very important that people understand how their advisors are being compensated and evaluate them for the work that they're being compensated on. So as an advice-only planner, we should be evaluated and compensated specifically for our planning. But that's really hard, I think, for somebody who has never had it to know how to evaluate. So how would you explain to a prospective client who's never experienced working with someone like us, how do they evaluate our value when they're used to comparing us to, let's say, what's the performance of my investment account over the past 3-5 years?
Yeah. So, in that regard, I think the real value that we're getting from a planner is that we're really looking at their entire financial picture. And we're looking at it from a perspective of where they're at today and then where they want to be at. Whereas their traditional sense of, okay, what are the numbers? What's my rate of return? That can be very valuable too and can be in partnership with a planner. But that's only one small piece of their financial picture. Whereas a planner will look at all of the pieces that affect their financial lives. And that's where I think the real value is with a financial planner.
Yeah, I think it's really hard because people are so used to direct metrics, right? And looking at performance, for example, historical performance is looking in the rearview mirror and saying, how well did it do? But if you think about investment performance, just as an example, it is not something that is in anyone's control except for if you're buying a GIC, right? So most investment advisors or financial advisors don't have control over that end metric that they're being measured upon. All they have control on is which risks are they taking or not taking to get to that end result. So it's a much, much different measure, I think, and also very difficult for people to really understand until they've gone through a financial planning exercise. And the value that we can provide from a peace of mind perspective, from an alignment across all the various areas of planning perspective is something that I don't think that they would get working with just somebody who works in silos. So who's working on a specific area, who isn't maybe covering things holistically. So I think, again, it's hard to know unless you're in it, unless you've gone through the exercise. But I know that this area is growing, and I applaud anyone who is considering coming into the fold for even giving that a thought. And I have had so many advisors reach out to me, to be honest, to talk about becoming an advice-only financial planner at various stages in their career, including you,
yeah.
Justine, because I think it's becoming more and more interesting for clients out there as something that, like you said, is an unbiased approach to ensuring that their financial ducks are in order. Circling back to something that I mentioned about you earlier, what do you think is your financial planning superpower? So all planners, I feel like everybody has an eye of brilliance, right? My mom told me that a long time ago. So what is something that makes you stand out as a planner that you can hang your hat upon?
So for me, you touched on it already. I feel that I'm able to put the human side into the planning, in a much stronger way than other advisors or planners that I've met. My focus truly is on the client and their values, and really understanding and taking a really non-judgmental approach. Knowing that everybody comes from different backgrounds, different situations. I can't say I've ever had two clients the same, and I've worked with a ton of people. So being able to, really bring that human aspect to it, and, on that same regard, being able to really truly explain in terms that they can understand. So I'm able to describe or explain really complex ideas in ways that someone who's not in the industry would understand. And to me, that is really, really important, because I feel like my job is wasted if I'm making a plan that someone doesn't even understand, and therefore they can't even act upon it. It's just going to be a document that sits in someone's filing cabinet and never referred to again. So I feel like my strength is really in being able to communicate what it means and how they can achieve it.
Yeah, and that idea of the implementation aspect of financial planning, which is I think often not paid enough attention to, is the most important thing for a financial planner to ensure that they support the client in. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because that is the hardest part for most clients to get through. Now that we have all this wonderful information and these recommendations, what do we do with that if we're not being supported by a financial planner who will assist with that implementation phase? That is really key. Can you possibly share a success story, or if you want to call it a case study, because everybody loves a good case study, of either an individual or a couple who's had a situation that you find that you can that has been significantly improved through your financial planning process?
Sure. Yeah, I had a family that I worked with quite a few years ago, but they've always held a special place in my heart, because I think because of how much I felt I was able to impact them. So they were in their late 50s, both really great jobs. They loved their work, and had, adult children that were starting lives of their own. And unfortunately, one of those children became very, very ill. And, my clients really wanted to be there and support them. And of course, they had so much on their minds at that time. It's amazing how much our priorities shift when certain things happen in our lives. And, they came to me and they told me they were talking about the stress and how, they're struggling with focusing on their work, that they're taking a significant amount of time off. And I knew from general idea that they were in a pretty decent spot financially, but I wanted to offer them more. And so I said, well, I understand that this is creating so much stress. Have you considered taking some time off of work, or even retiring early? And, they said, well, I not seriously, because we're only 50, and one was 57 and one was 58. And they weren't planning really on stopping working until almost 65. And so I, suggested, well, why don't we just have a really holistic look and see if this is even a possibility? And at least then, we'll get some answers and some clarity. And so I took all their information. We had some really great conversations about, what they wanted to do with that time if they were able to leave work. And after I put the plan together, I was so excited to meet with them. because I was able to, I mean, there was going to be some, their pension wasn't going to be as much. It was a reduced pension from their employer. But I knew that what really mattered to them most right now was spending that time with their family. And, I was excited to show them, hey, yes, it's not going to look as amazing as it would if you waited till 65. But then I'm giving them the choice to say, yeah, you know what? We know that we can make a financial sacrifice now, but still be okay and be able to do the things that were really important to them now. So yeah, it was a really great meeting. I remember it was during COVID times, and so it was a virtual meeting, but the wife, she just started tearing up, and she said, I never thought that I could stop, and she's like, now I can literally give my notice like tomorrow if I wanted to. And I think she's still delayed a little bit, but it was really empowering to be able to help them in that time where they were really struggling.
What a wonderful story. And even I got emotional as a mom, and I know you're a mom too, just thinking about that. And I think what a powerful use of your skills, because you went back to that value, the values basis of the client and what was important to them. It's not always about maximizing net worth and having the biggest pension and achieving some sort of, like you said, dollar value metric that really doesn't matter. I mean, it matters in certain respects, but in the grand scheme of things, like you said, there's always something behind the numbers. So I absolutely adore that example. Thank you for sharing that story. It's really powerful. I'll share one of my own from recently. I had a client who I worked with about a year ago, her and her husband, on some early retirement planning. And we had a wonderful engagement, and they had a financial advisor as well. And after we finished our engagement, they moved on and they continued to work with their advisor, which is totally fine. And then I heard back from the client, the wife in December, and her husband had just passed away 2 days before reaching out to me. And I was the first person she thought to reach out to because she just needed support. And I told her, you need to take a few days, I think. I understand this is, highly emotional and very scary. But we ended up reconnecting in another engagement. And she had literally canceled all of her subscriptions, her Netflix, her everything, because she was so terrified. And she didn't know if she would be able to make ends meet. And she just was afraid to spend anything. And so after our last call where we went through the planning, she said, this is better than therapy. I feel so much better after today. And I know she's in therapy because she's grieving her husband currently. And it meant so much to me as a planner to hear those words. And I think that, and just like you probably felt with your client, those are the things that make it worthwhile. Yeah. Those are the moments that you go, I'm doing the right thing,
yes.
and I'm going the right way. So, just to share that story too, because I think the more that people understand the impact that working with a planner can have, the more people that might understand the value that we can provide.
I agree completely.
So what are you working on now, just to switch gears a little bit? So what's next for Justine as a planner?
Yeah. So, this is a huge part in my path is, starting to work with you at Modern Sense and being able to truly feel like I'm giving that unbiased advice. So, just learning how to, be doing this planning, kind of on my own, but with this support of you and Vicky or other consultants. And that's a big one for me, and I'm loving it. It's given me so much inspiration. And I've also decided to finish up my certified financial planner designation. I've been on that path for a while, but I think I kind of let the idea of it go when I was working at the bank because it just wasn't valued the same way. And so having that, that under my belt will feel fantastic. I think for me, it'll teach me other strategies and ways of doing planning, I'm sure. But already what I've noticed in preparing for it, for my last exam is, the focus that they're really placing on the human aspect in that holistic aspect, which when I started in this journey in 2008 in the financial industry, it wasn't really focused on that. It was very numbers focused and, investment focused. And so being a true financial planner and having, the backing of FP Canada that, really aligns with my values as a planner is really important. So I'm working on finishing that right now. And then, in my personal life, I've got 4 kids. So that keeps me very busy between competitive skating and hockey and all the other fun stuff that they get up to. And with summer coming up, I'm excited to get my yard going. I do lots of yard work back there. My house was previously owned by a landscaping company. So yeah, the amount of gardening and upkeep is pretty intense, but we have an amazing space for hosting. I had our entire community come to a summer party last year, which is only 10 houses, by the way. We're a small community, but everybody came and it was fantastic. And so I'm just looking forward to, more summers like that and continuing my growth as an advice-only planner.
Yeah, thanks for sharing some of that personal side of you. I was hoping you were going to mention that you were a busy mom and also a dog mom, not to be forgotten. You said something that I do want to circle back to in there. You said you did think that RBC valued the CFP designation. Can you explain why you think that might be the case? Obviously, it's conjecture, but I would love to hear your opinion on that.
So, historically, and perhaps things are changing. I haven't been in the bank for a little bit, but historically, the focus has been on a certain positions that you eventually make your way to being a financial planner for. In the past, you didn't even have to have necessarily any accreditation to call yourself a financial planner or for the company you worked with to be considered a financial planner. That's different now, which is fantastic. But at the banks, a lot of times using the personal financial planner designation is, all that they require. It's not a bad designation. I have it. I truly learned a lot from my licensing process. But I would say, for me, the biggest part of my training and my education has actually been in working with clients and actually experiencing, different things that come up. So in the bank, I think they're just very focused on as much output as possible. It's very numbers focused. And, if they require less of their staff to be able to still produce the same results, I feel like they're going to take that. And that's kind of where I've seen, a lot of the bigger banks flow through that side of things.
For sure. And it's such a good perspective to have, I think, as a planner, having worked in different facets of the industry. And there's such implicit trust with the banks.
Yes.
I mean, they're like, in Canada, they're like the mafia, right? Like everybody trusts the banks. And I think it's important to always question, no matter where your advisor or planner works, always important to question, the motivation behind some of the actions, what accreditations that person might have, how they're compensated. Just ask all the same questions of anybody that you would hire, even us, anybody.
Yes.
I think it's really important because, yes, it might be a big green machine or blue machine or whatever machine it is, but they're big for a reason. And you want to just make sure that you don't get lost in that as a client and that your interests and needs are still being met to what you need them to be met at.
In the banking world, I remember specifically when I transitioned from my first role in the industry at, what was called W Private Investors and then Hollis Wealth, because that was owned by Scotiabank, and now it's IA Private Wealth. When I transitioned from that more independent model into RBC, I specifically remember thinking, I am going to be able to get so many more clients because I have the bank's name and trust. And honestly, it was easy. It was so easy to get clients because a lot of the clients they've been banking there since before I was born. That was where they had their first bank account. And they've just been moved within the bank structure to, either align with a financial planner or align with, a banking advisor or a financial advisor. But truly, and that's why I had left, was the really difficult thing is they're just wanting to squeeze as much people through as possible. And therefore, I couldn't do the best job that I could do as a planner because, they were constantly adding, you need to have more clients, more clients, more clients, more clients. But the more clients I had, the less I was able to do for each of those clients. It just wasn't physically possible. And it's still moving in that direction, which I think is so sad, because there could be, a very different strategy in how they're servicing those clients, especially the ones that have been, so loyal to the brand or the company, and being able to appreciate that. But again, like you said, I think it doesn't matter if you're meeting with somebody from the bank or somebody from another investment firm, or your friend at the coffee shop. I think the very best way to make sure that you're getting the right advice for you is to ask those questions. Make sure that they actually have, the accreditations, and then to partner with that, the experience. There's, a big difference between, doing a lot of learning and being book smart to actually being able to use that experience and that knowledge in ways that are going to be really helpful to the clients. So just ask the questions, no matter who you're meeting with, and make sure you are getting clear and transparent answers. If you're not, there's your red flag right there.
And I think it's also hard, I'll just point out, for clients to know what the right questions are to ask. We talked about this a little bit before. Clients are not experts at interviewing financial advisors in general. And knowing what questions you ought to ask is actually really difficult because we're used to asking questions around, what does your performance of your, benchmark portfolio look like? That sort of thing. But I think if you really think about the values conversation that we're talking about, how many clients are talking to their advisors about that? Is there an alignment there with respect to the way that somebody might run their practice and what the client is looking for? Not everybody is for everybody. We are not for everybody. Financial advisor is not for everybody. Nobody is the be all and end all. So I think understanding, first of all, as a client, what it is that you need, what type of person do you need? What kind of things do you need them to do for you? That should be at the forefront of your mind before talking to a financial person in general. Know what you're going into, know what kind of relationship is going to be established, and establish what those clear objectives are from the beginning. I'm working now with a client, and part of our work together is working to communicate better with this client's financial advisor.
Right.
Because there is a disconnect and a mistrust there. And so they hired me to help in this respect. So I find it very interesting that we're in this volume-based business that the banks have, and to extent a lot of assets under management style practices, that we lose that human element and that communication element when it gets too big. So I think it's really challenging, but for clients out there, just know the questions that you need to ask. If you don't have all the answers or you don't have all the questions initially, that's okay. You can come back to it, and there's never such thing as a bad question. So if an advisor does have credentials and you don't know what they mean, ask, what is that? What does that allow you to do? What's the licensing body behind that? Those are not bad questions. So just, getting off the soapbox for a minute, but, really important that when we're establishing new relationships, whether it be financial or anywhere in your life, that you know what you're getting yourself into as much as possible before committing to it.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly, what I was talking about earlier about, having that transparency. So, making sure that when you're asking those questions, you're getting clear understandings about what to expect and what's expected of you. Our advice is only as good as the information that we get. So, if someone's not providing all the information, they're not going to get the best advice. And that's why, when we work with a client, we always use, a really well-written engagement agreement that is very transparent in terms of our pricing, our work, and our process, and then what we expect from the clients, because it is a partnership and it's a collaborative effort.
So before we wrap this up, I just want to ask, what is one last takeaway that you would like people to know? This could be about anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be financially related.
I think my last takeaway that I'd love for people to know is, I love to work with anybody. It doesn't mean you have to be wealthy to access financial planning, especially advice-only planning. I think that's a really common misconception. And it's really unfortunate because sometimes it means you're getting a much later start in planning. So I'm happy to meet any different situations and any prospective clients. And I'll always be open and transparent if I think I can help you. And if not, give you suggestions on where you can go.
And where can people find you on the interweb?
On the interwebs, you can find me on our website at www.modernsense.ca. I do have my profile on there, and we can also book complimentary consultations, just a 30-minute touch point to see if I can help you figure out what you're looking for. And if I'm able to help you meet those, those needs, and if not, who else might be able to help you? You can also find me on LinkedIn, and mostly through our website's the best spot to go.
Fantastic. And for those listening, there's also a fantastic resource for advice-only planners. It's www.adviceonlyplanners.ca. Which is a directory of all of us across Canada. I shouldn't say all of us, a lot of us across Canada who are members of this directory, and also members of the Financial Planning Association of Canada, or FPAC, which we are both members of. So thank you so much for your time today, Justine. I really appreciate the conversation. I know you and I could keep talking for hours. We could keep going, but I think that we'll cap it there for today. But I just wanted to say thank you for your candidness, your transparency, your openness, and your honesty. These are all wonderful qualities that I know make you a wonderful human first and planner alongside that.
Thank you so much.
That being said, thank you so much for your time.
Andrea.